I think you and I probably get this question asked a lot. How do you guys, when you guys go into any major metropolitan city, and when you and I have been in a lot of them, looking for properties over the last years, how do you determine whether it's a good deal or not? How do you know whether it's a good city or not? How do you know whether it's good government or not? And so what I've looked at, I've always tried to create a little formula that we can use. And I think you and I use the same one. I call it the sexy six, because I don't know what else to call it, but or germ, JIRHHM. And so the first thing we look for in a city are jobs. Are people coming there for jobs? Is there a migration of employment? And if they're not coming there for that necessarily, is there something there that is generating jobs that will keep people there for generations to come? A hospital, a university, things of that nature that are not going away. So that's the first thing we look at. Is there a strong job base there that will either continue to grow exponentially or is just going to stay solid for generations to come? The second thing we look for is an increase of rents. People that hang around Sam and I, David Aristorenian, probably saw this a lot when we first started hanging out a few years ago. When we would look at deals, the first thing I would ask Sam is, what's the bump? What's the bump? We would always use that phrase. What's the bump on this? And what that meant was, how much could we raise those rents going in? What's the opportunity zone that others are missing? Where's that space that we can come in and raise something from $150 to $300 within a few years? Why is that important? Because we get that GOI up, we get that NOI up, and then we go back to the lender and say, we bought the property at $115,000 in rents per month. Now it's $140,000 in rents per month. We've raised it by $30,000, $40,000. We want all or most of our money back. That's why that bump, that rent increase that we're looking for is so important, that we're always looking for. The third thing is high FICO scores. Sam, you want to talk about that when we go into a city, why that's important?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's interesting that when people buy in the ghetto, they look at potential rent upside. They look at, a few different things, but they don't realize that, if someone doesn't have a good credit score, they're not going to care if you're going after their credit or garnishing wages, and they can just leave in the middle of the night and they don't care. They don't care if they're paying their rent or not. And that can make managing a property very, very challenging. So like in Cleveland, our average credit score for our tenants is 730. You better believe that they're paying their rent. That's such a hard renter demographic to replicate. And across the board, we're in C+, B- assets, and those renters care about their credit and they pay their rent. And if they do struggle, they're much easier to work with than the demographic who, they come in with a very low credit score. They already have a lot of challenges, a lot of charge-offs, and it's going to be a lot of work and pretty much hopeless getting back rent that is owed from these people. They know how to work the system. So that's the difference in it. And it, for us, makes a huge difference on our profitability and the ability to generate that income and receive that income that we're supposed to.
Perfect. So the next level of that would be a high barrier of entry. Now, I'm not sure, most people don't talk about this, but when Sam and I go into a city, we are looking for what is called a high barrier of entry, or what Warren Buffett calls a moat around our property. What does that mean? That means that there's not, acres and acres of land around us that could be easily converted into apartment buildings where we could have competition. That means that the average price of a home in the neighborhood is not $50,000 to $100,000, where someone could say, wait a minute, do I pay Sam and Michael rent every month, or do I just go out and buy a home? I'd rather just buy a home. So when we go into an area, we want to make sure that's pretty much built out. That city for 30, 40, 50 years really wanted apartment buildings, but guess what? No more apartment buildings. Never going to happen again in that particular city or that area that we're in. And not only that, but the average home in the area is $300,000 to $600,000, somewhere in that range. Our tenants, God bless them, they're great people. They are digging ditches, they are waiters, they are professors, they're doing all these things. They are never going to have a down payment for a house. They'll always have our $1,000 a month. They're never going to have that down payment. And those are our peeps. Those are our tenants. And we're lucky to have them. The next thing is R for red states or landlord friendly states. I don't care whether you're on the left, middle, or right in the political spectrum. I don't care what you are. I'm more of a libertarian more than anything else, a conservative libertarian. But I don't care if you're, what your politics are. The fact of the matter is that the most landlord friendly states are the red states. And that's what we look for. There's a deal that I passed up last year that I'm still kicking myself over, but it is what it is. And that was the Albuquerque deal, the 30 units, where Sam goes in, he says, Mike, we got this great deal. And, they're buying it for, what did you buy for 30,000 a door?
Yep.
Yeah. And now it's worth what, 90 a door?
78.
78 a door, whatever. Still, whatever it is, it's a lot more, and it's going to be a great deal. You'll probably get all your money back this year or next year, correct?
Next October, we'll get more than what we put into it.
Yeah. Why didn't I want to be in Albuquerque? Because Albuquerque, New Mexico is kind of turning, it's purplish. It may be turning even more blue. And coming from California, I've been so scarred by the California political system and real estate. I said, you know what? I don't want to do that. Was a mistake, probably, but it doesn't matter. I put more money in these other deals. But that's kind of a gray line. But anyway, we're looking for places. You want to talk about now more, Sam, about red states?
Yeah, the only reason we did Albuquerque is because it was such an insanely low price deal. There was so much upside, and you still didn't feel good about being in a bluish state or city, which was fine. I think that's always the best decision. But we knew what we could do with the property, so we still bought it. But if the margins, if we're talking about one of these normal deals, these 15 to 18% IRR deals where there's $100 to $200 in upside, no, we're not going to buy in a blue state or a blue city ever, because if it's a normal great deal that we buy, we cannot afford to have people live there for 6, 9, 12 months, 18 months and not pay rent. And then we go to the eviction judge. We say, hey, we want to evict this person. Here's the contract. They're not paying. And this is exactly what happens in California. And the judge will say, but why do you want to evict them?
Right.
Well, they haven't paid rent for 12 months.
Right.
And the judge will say, yeah, but why do you want to evict them?
Yeah.
Well, we have this contract that they signed saying that they would pay rent if we provided them housing.
Yeah.
And they haven't paid rent. And the judge will say, well, you have to have a reason to evict them.
Right.
So that's the insanity that we want to stay away from, that would massively hurt our NOI. And so we would never buy one of these larger projects in a place where we feel like we can't do that. Now, Albuquerque is pretty good about evictions, and we're doing fantastic. But yeah, that's something that you and I just don't want to mess with.
Yeah. Then the last one is M for migration. The bottom line is, are people coming in or out of that city? Are people migrating towards El Paso because of the university, because of the hospital, for jobs, or are they not, for the great housing and everything else that's going on? So that's the last one. That's the bottom line. We look at migration patterns. So here's the thing. When you have this picture and you can look at it pretty quickly, that's when you know if it's a good deal and all these other boxes are checked. That's when Sam and I can move very quickly. We don't have to be like a committee like some of our competitors, where we'll get back in a week or two after we go through a bunch of charts and whirly girls. We already know what we're looking at. We already know what we want. If the numbers work and all these other boxes are checked, we're ready to deploy whatever we need to deploy to make that deal. And this is what gives us an edge. So I just wanted to talk about that